Now that I finally have my router mounted inside the wing of my table saw, I wanted to get on to making a router table fence. I wanted something that I could attach to the existing table saw fence, much like Keith Brown did. I started by cutting some strips of NDF and not pressing record on the camera. I marked up about 28mm from the bottom edge of the board, and then I used my 51mm hole saw to cut a hole. I did that on a 116mm piece and also a 100mm piece. I used my small square to draw some lines either side of the hole that I had drawn to cut out that bottom piece, so that would make my front and bottom section for the router table fence. With the workpiece securely clamped to my bench, I used probably my favourite tool purchase of 2024, my cordless jigsaw, to do the cuts. I really like this jigsaw because it, well, works. This process was done for my front and bottom sections of the router fence. I used one of my other strips as the piece that's going to attach the fence to the table saw fence. The 6mm square head bolts that I'd bought for the router table were actually no use on that project, but it turns out they fit in really well in the table saw fence slots, so I used one of those, marked out the location on my strip, and then did some measuring to drill some holes for the piece that will attach to the existing table saw fence. So here's that back section in place. It bolts in fairly nicely with a fairly even gap along the bottom, and I've test fitted the bottom and the front faces for the fence, and it all seems to go together okay. Off camera, I had got into Fusion 360 and designed some 3D printed star type knobs that I could use to fasten the router fence to the table saw fence, and they were printing in the background. The other thing I noticed is that I need some 45mm angle brackets, stiffeners, supports to make sure that this thing stays at 90 degrees. So then it was taking some of my offcuts over to the miter saw, setting it to 45, and then cutting two, probably should have cut four, but I cut two 45-degree support pieces for either end of the router table fence. At this point in the mock-up, it was looking enough like a router table fence that I was kind of happy with it, and I was going to leave it there. But then I could actually hear Keith's video going in the background, and I remember that he put a split front fence on. If I had my time again, to be honest, I wouldn't do it because I rushed it and I am not the woodworker that Keith is. I measured the halfway point of my other 116mm wide strip of MDF and then head over to the miter saw and split it in two. I went and got some pieces of cardboard to shim up the pieces I've just cut. I can tell you at this point, this is where I think I started to introduce some errors into my fence, and this is the reason why I would go back in time and not make this section. Maybe that's too harsh. Maybe what I should have said is, in this section, I believe I should have used maybe the super glue and tape trick to glue this to the front face of my router fence and then gone back and drilled the holes with the drill press rather than doing what I did here. Okay, I'm going to try and do all my harping on about the mistakes I made. This section is not a mistake. I think I did okay in pre-marking where the holes should go. In the next section, you will see me drilling with a Forstner bit with eyelet holes already in the front section of the fence, so that's a mistake. What I should have done, instead of drilling the pieces for the front sliding portion of the fence, they should have been pilot holed and drilled together with the front section of the fence clamped together on the drill press. Instead, I used the drill press on the sliding portion of the fence, and then I used a hand drill to try and transfer those marks over through into the actual fence. So what I did is introduce a lot of error into the actual important part of the fence, not the two scrap bits that I could have made again. It probably won't be a big problem for me because of how I use my router table, but if I were to have my time back, I would do it differently. So next I use my favourite jigsaw to clean up the slots that are actually on the front face of the fence, and that way I could slide the sliding sections in those slots using those flat top bolts that I have had in my collection for years, ever since I saw Steve Ramsey make a router table fence. Moving on to assembly now, I went for glue and brad nails. Glue because, well, that's going to do all the actual hard work, and brad nails as a clamping solution because things do not always line up as good as you want, and sometimes you can bend, flex things a little bit better than you can with screws. I tried to use the flat cast iron surface of the table saw as a flat reference surface for assembling this. That just turned out to be a really silly idea. Regardless though, I did fumble and bumble my way through and got the thing together. I thought I'd leave it overnight and then come back the next day to see what had become of the monstrosity that was my tribute router table fence. Watching this, even in the edit, really takes me back to slowing down and planning your glue up and taking your time, because there are just moments where I can see things going wrong because I'm rushing. Like now, where I realise that things aren't lining up, and now where I decide to just beat on it with a hammer. At least in this part, my test fitting looks like it's working, and at this point I should leave it alone and wait till tomorrow. Nope, one more job. Gotta glue my nuts into my knobs. Thanks very much, Fix It Fingers, for the glue. Still getting use. But no, knobs are not the only thing that I've been 3D printing on this project, because the dust shroud. So I twisted my knobs into position at the back of the fence. Good news, that test fit number 1 for the dust shroud, excellent. Test fit number 2, okay, back to CAD. Dust shroud number 2, the one that fits. Okay, it's dust shroud number 2, the one that fits better than the first one, but probably could do with having dust shroud number 3. I modelled some screw holes into it which made it easier to fit, so there's a good thing I did. There you have it, a router table fence inspired by other YouTubers, built in the pre-going back to work stress that actually seems to work. So if you enjoyed watching me stuff this build up and would like to see me stuff up other builds, please hit that subscribe button. Please give this video a like and share it to people that you either like or don't. Share it to them and they can be disappointed too. Thanks very much.